Hello everyone and welcome back. So I talked about this a few weeks ago, but I had picked up the book called Not Magic after I had finished reading Cord Magic, and I figured the two could go pretty well together. She talked a little bit about knots, but not a whole lot. It was mostly focused on the actual string itself, which is fine, except for the fact that now I need her to just write a book on Not Magic specifically because this one was terrible. See, I've tried really hard recently. It's like one of my goals for this year is to be pretty positive, put the twist on whatever book I'm reading. Like, what is the target audience? Even if I'm not the target audience, who would like this book? And this is one that I am struggling with. So if you couldn't guess, today we're talking about this little book. I thought it would be much bigger, but it's not. And so the main, focus group for this, I suppose, which a Goodreads review had also mentioned, is that this is the type of book you would expect to find at a Ross in the teen section. And when I looked into this book further, that's the exact market, because the series that it's a part of, didn't know it was part of a series, is something like the Mystical Handbooks. And lo and behold, another one in that was this one. Remember this one, Moon Magic? That I had high hopes for and it sucked, but I also kept it kind of realistic because I found this at Kohl's, so same vibes, because of course it is. Same publisher, so at this point, if you see anything from this publisher, do not buy it. The publisher is Wellfleet, W-E-L-L, Fleet. Just don't. Of course, I'll go over more specifics for this book in the extended discussion on Patreon, but I do have 5 major points I wanted to talk about in this video. So these are mainly just red flags that I found, not just for this book, but future books that I will be purchasing for witchcraft. And it does make it difficult if you're buying online, because some of these things, it only is available when you actually have the physical copy or an ebook or whatever in front of you. It's not necessarily outwardly there available to the public, so it does make it a little bit challenging, but it makes me really nervous to buy online. At this point, I'm really only going to buy from publishers or authors that I know of, like Llewellyn. It's pretty reputable for the witchcraft community, pagan community. Penzak, I know that whatever book he writes, I'm probably going to get a good information from. But some of these other ones, like Wellfleet, never heard of them, not really big in the witchcraft community. There's some that are, new publishers and whatever, maybe take a shot on those, but at this point, I will probably only get those if I go into a bookstore or I go into a witchy store and I can physically look at these few things to make sure it's actually going to be worth my while. And even then, if I don't like it, at least I tried. But this is just a few things that I'm this feels red flag-ish. And after reading this book, Modern Witch got a little bit better because at least they tried more than this book. So here is my red flags and just overall opinions on this book. So the first thing is that the actual book itself does not have any information about the author. No about the author page, nowhere to find additional information from the author, and that is very alarming. Because typically, witchcraft teachers, they're gonna promote themselves. They're going to have some way of getting in contact with them. And whether it's through the publishing house, like a lot of Llewellyn's authors, it's, write to this address. And even then, modern times now, they really include more of the author's website. And depending on other publishing houses, they might include, their handle on social media or other books they've written or something about the author. And it also will typically include what they're trained in, what they specialize in, because nobody is really a jack of all trades to the best extent. You're going to be oh, I'm an eclectic witch, or I am, because if you're that, then you're not going to really have a lot of information on traditional Wicca, per se. Or, you've done, 25 years in tarot, you're probably gonna know a decent amount on tarot. Now, numbers and things don't necessarily mean a lot of knowledge, but if it's lacking that completely, and the amount of years and what traditions you're really a part of, it just feels a little bit like a red flag. There is a little bit of information on the page on Amazon, which I did find after I took my notes, but the fact that the book itself doesn't have any of this is a bit alarming. And even then, the most information is like a few other books that were written, and then it talks about how she's a writer for like the astrology section of Cosmopolitan, which, not to hate on whatever gig she's working on, or they or whoever, if it's even a person, it could just be a team of people under a pen name, not the highest quality of witchcraft writing that you really want to be learning from, unfortunately. Like, it's just a trendy thing for them. Second red flag that I noticed from this book, which doesn't necessarily have to be a red flag for every book, but I have noticed that the witchy books that do not have a bibliography or recommended readings tend to be terrible. And I think the main reason for this is because they get their information from a Google search, because that's the surface level of information that you're finding. If the book has a bibliography listed, and especially if it's multiple pages, it's going to be well written. At least from the ones that I've read. I'm sure there's going to be a few that definitely don't fit that mold, but every one that I have read so far that has a good section of a bibliography is well written. If it doesn't have that, it feels like information you could Google, and there's no references to prove otherwise. So the third point, which is very specific to this book, it's not necessarily a red flag, but a lot of other reviews of this book pointed this one out and had issue with it, and it is the Witch's Oath, which is really more of a Wiccan thing. It's not necessarily witchcraft. Witchcraft has a very broad section of practices and beliefs and ethics, and Harm None definitely does have its place in there, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone who is a witch practices that sort of morality. And so to say it's a witch's oath is kind of like, it's more of a Wiccan thing, but a lot of people took issue with that they feel like the author is telling them to do something, which personally I'm like, it's a book, you can ignore it. But the other part that other people had mentioned, and I noticed as well, is that she doesn't stick to one lane. She tells you, do no harm, and then proceeds to have love spells and different things that are affecting other people's will, and therefore is causing harm. Because at least for most people, harm includes taking away somebody's consent. And that's a big topic in today's world. Consent is key for everything, so why are we just tossing that out the window in witchcraft? The next one, again, this is specifically more for this book, not necessarily just a red flag for all books. And it's a topic that I don't typically cover that much because I'm not like really big into that conversation. Other people cover it pretty well, and that is cultural appropriation. Now, that is a big topic. That is a scary topic to bring up because people get very aggressive on that topic. So I'm not here to really have that entire discussion, but I could really see where this book crossed that line a bit if it is something you are sensitive to. And even for me, who I'm not super concerned about that, because I am a solitary practitioner and I try to do enough research as I can, and there are some things that I just don't do, but like, whatever. Some people are very sensitive about that. And so keeping in mind I'm not one of those people, even I was kind of like, this feels really like just kind of tossed in there with not a lot of background information. And that was like, there was one particular spell, which was the, what was it called? Chinese Dragon Charm for Good Fortune. Like, there's not been a lot of a discussion in this book about and leading up to using Chinese traditional culture in your witchcraft. Like, that really wasn't like heavily covered, and it, I'm pretty sure, like contradicts itself, because if you're mixing cultures, you want to be very careful with that, at least to some degree. And the other part is that we have that, and then she goes earlier in the book, the author, if it is one person, I'm still not thoroughly convinced, just kind of disses on deities, specifically Aphrodite, and just calls her the vain goddess of love. And I'm like, seriously? Really? After just, like, the previous book I had read was Dedicant, Devotee, and Priest, and so the respect and honor that's placed on deities in that book, to then have the next author be like, this vain goddess that was in charge of this and blah. I'm Like, very harsh feeling for somebody who is, like, I'm very heavily deity focused, and so it's very irksome to be like, this vain goddess. Ran into a new problem with my camera, and that is that the SD card has now decided to constantly not have space. So that's fun, despite deleting like 45 videos. So that's fun. So we're gonna try and do this last point kind of quickly, which is the biggest red flag of any witchy book ever. Occult, magic, pagan, whatever. If this is in the book, just don't even pick it up, because I have checked in multiple other books, not just Llewellyn publications, but a few other of the like kind of pagan publishing houses. They don't include this. So if it's there, it's a red flag. And it is just a trendy book trying to jump on the bandwagon that witchcraft is like super cool and edgy for teenagers, and the information is not going to be well researched. It's not going to be from an actual practitioner who really actually studies this. It's just somebody trying to make bank off of a community. And this is the quote, and it was in both of these books, Moon Magic and this one. For entertainment purposes only, do not attempt any spell, recipe, procedure, or prescription in this book. The author, publisher, packager, manufacturer, distributor, and their collective agents waive all liability for the reader's use or application of any text herein. If it says that, run. Just set it back off the shelf, walk away from it. It's not worth it. Return it. Not good. So unfortunately, I'm having to cut my last point short because despite now deleting almost 100 old videos off of my SD card, it still has only given me 2 minutes, and I'm like, I've deleted probably like 4 hours worth of recording. So that makes sense. So anyways, moral of the story is that if a book has any kind of publication that says it is for entertainment purposes only, and it's a witchcraft book, avoid it. It is not a good book. It's not going to be helpful because the author and publisher and everyone involved is just saying that it's just for funsies. So why would I take it seriously if they're not going to take it seriously? And so unfortunately, like any books that come out of this publishing house, whether the information might be good, I will no longer be reading for this reason. And it also makes me want to vet the publishing houses a little bit more. And that's not to say that witchcraft books won't have a warning. They typically will. It will usually say something like, you know, tread with caution, especially like for using herbs and stuff, like consult your doctor, things like that, which makes sense because obviously if you're on certain medications and you drink a tea or you ingest some type of herb, sometimes those can counteract each other and cause problems. That is a different warning than saying that a book for the, you know, religious, spiritual beliefs of witchcraft is for entertainment purposes only. So, moral of the story, don't buy this book. Don't buy anything from this like weird like series that they have. Again, I think it's like the Mystical Handbook or something, but anything from this publisher, just avoid. So anyways, that is going to be it. If you want to see the extended discussion on Patreon, it's available. It's run out of time again, so I will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, and I will see you all soon.